All right, let's get straight into it. Let's get cracking, and let's start off talking about the game on the weekend. 7 changes Ange made from the Europa League tie to the 2-0 Fulham loss. Jim, do you feel like he's rotating a bit too much? Do you think it was a bit too many changes coming into the game on the weekend?
Well, I think there was one change that didn't need to have been made, and that was James Maddison. But I do think the rest all have solid reasons for the changes. And I know people are saying there's 14 days after this. Like, we've got loads of time to rest. Well, that doesn't really matter once your hamstring's torn. It doesn't work that way. So Odegaard would have started 3 games in 7 days, and he's come back from a 5-month layoff. So to me, that was the kind of decision we would have made at the start of the season that would have resulted in everyone calling Ange a plonker. So he's learnt from that and said, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not risking these players for a long-term injury. So I think he made the right decision not to play Odegaard. And it was similar with Berryvale. He was going down in, I think, the 93rd minute. It was an injury time of the Europa League time. And I was worried he pulled a hammy because he was getting stretched out and he looked in a lot of pain. So I think those 2 players, it was valid injury minute management. I would say, though, our midfield, James Maddison's had a lot of rotation. I think he's had a bit more rest than the others. It would have been useful to have him in midfield from the start because that midfield lacked creativity. So that's the one I would kind of be slightly less sympathetic for. But overall, I didn't really blame the lineup for the performance too much. I blamed some other things, but you haven't asked me that, so I won't answer.
Well, you can go on and say, well, we'll go back to Danny with the rotation thing in a second. But I'm intrigued now. What do you blame the result and the performance on?
So I blame it on, well, a couple of things, really. One is I still think there's some people in that squad who are fighting tooth and nail for Postecoglou, and those are the people I think he's given opportunities to, typically the younger players, right? They've been signed by Ange, they've come in, he's from day one said you can add value today, and he's believed in them, and they're fighting tooth and nail and trying to reward him for that. I think there's a bit of a lack of drive from other players that are getting close to the end of their contracts, and they probably have been told there's no negotiation right now for a new contract. Writing's on the wall, effectively. You will likely be sold in the summer. And I think Bissouma's one of those. And I don't like to hang players out and say, like, oh, that makes him some lazy player who's got a bad attitude. I think we know so little about these people's personal lives and what's going on. We can sometimes be very overly critical, not knowing what's going on in their lives. But I think it must be hard to motivate yourself when you are likely to be sold in the summer. Your manager can't commit to keeping you. You're a bit part player, and you're sat 14th in the league in a game nothing to play for. I can understand why some players would be like, I just can't get G'd up for this. No matter what the manager says, he can't really incentivise them to get too motivated. So,
but
go on,
just to counteract that, right? For me, just on your point there, the players play for Tottenham Hotspur. They should be able to motivate themselves. They shouldn't need to be able to have someone G them up for a game, essentially, right? They're highly paid professionals. So in my book, right, these players, they are playing for a massive club. They're playing for Tottenham Hotspurs. And if they don't even want to play for that bad, regardless of who the manager is, that's on the players, right? Of course, the manager has impact on that, but those players should realise that they are playing for Tottenham. They're not playing for Stoke City, or they're not playing for a Burnley or a Barnet or something like this. It's a big club. They're supposed to have ambitions, right? And anyone who comes into this club, I want them to play for the badge, not for their wage. That's what I want. So just to say in that, it's just, for me, players these day and age, I think they're too mollycoddled. I think they're a bunch of prima donnas, in my opinion. They're treated like gods and celebrities. And it's like every little thing now is that we can't criticize them. And for me, these players have not given their heart and soul for that shirt that they wear. And that is a massive problem for me.
No, I agree, Danny. I think I actually feel, and it's people kind of get quite upset when I say this, but I actually feel bad for Postecoglou in some respects. And I do think that's because some of those players have not shown up for him and have let him down in massive moments where he put trust in them. And it's put him in a really difficult position and made him some really difficult decisions to make. And yeah, he could have held his emotions in better the way he's handled some of them. But I do think he's been put in difficult situations by players who, like you say, they're not playing for the badge. They're not proud to play for Tottenham. And I will never criticise a player for not being good enough. I will only ever criticise a player who doesn't try. So like Harry Winks, for example, love him. We'll always love him. and I have huge respect for him. He wasn't good enough, but he would always run his heart and soul out on the pitch. I'm so proud to wear that badge. Whereas I would have less affiliation to a very talented player who's kind of not bothered in training and
Like
is
Ndombele,
flirting.
you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? But anyway, I digress.
I get no, I get what you mean. Just on that as well. Like I think there are some players you have to be critical of because there are times where not everyone's going to give 100% all the time, right? I mean, even Harry Winks. I remember so many games where this guy used to. I remember towards the end of his career at Spurs, he used to literally hide in games. He didn't want the ball, and I used to get so frustrated with someone like him. Just literally, he just used to like didn't want the ball. He used to hide behind players so that people couldn't find him, and that was so frustrating for me to watch. Especially someone like him who should be able to get on the ball, move the ball forward better than most players, or in the average of what we've had in the squad at the time. And just on what frustrates me, right, is I agree with you with what you said about the players. There's definitely a lot of players in that squad that are not playing for that manager or the club, right? They're playing for themselves or they don't care enough. But I've seen this for the last 10 years in every manager we've had. I've seen it under Poch. I've seen it under Conte. I've seen it under Jose. I saw it under Nuno. I've seen it even before that. There seems to be this fundamental problem at this football club where if the players just don't like the manager or don't like what's going on or how they're being coached, they're like, oh, forget it. I'm not gonna try. And that is a cultural problem.
The players have a lot of say and dictation around
which is
decisions made upstairs, and I think historically they have, and that has been a challenge. And it's interesting now because we're at this point where I think for the first time since I've been old enough to remember following Spurs, we've got a board who are going, I'm just going to ignore what everyone else wants, and I'm just going to go all in on this manager and give them loads of time. That's what it kind of feels like. But now we're experiencing the other side of it. I think there's a lot of pushback on that too. It's but maybe we're going down the rabbit hole of talking about Ange already, and we're meant to be talking about Europa League time. But back to that, sorry, guys. I think cohesion was the other point. It was just players have come back from injury, but it's all well and good seeing their names on the team sheet. But Mickey van der Ven clearly, I don't know why he was on the bench because he clearly wasn't fit enough to play. Firstly, sorry, I hear my son shouting in the background, and these other players who have come back, like Tell, it's his first time starting on the wing like that in a proper competitive game. There's just so many broken parts that aren't cohesive yet that are going to take a little bit of time before they get going. And I think that really showed. And we weren't all bad in that game. I thought against Fulham, we did show for parts it kind of working. But then as soon as we had to take a couple of players back off the pitch, it all kind of fell apart again. That's my personal.
Yeah, case in point, Cuti Romero. And it was the same. Cuti Romero had the same pretty much effect as Van der Ven going off in the Alkmaar game. But Danny, back on the point of rotation, do you think Ange rotated a bit too much in this Fulham game? What's your opinion on that one?
I mean, look, like I said to you guys before, I was honest. I didn't really watch the game. I was out. I watched the extended highlights and saw some other clips from the game. But for me, it doesn't. It doesn't matter to me who's playing in the Premier League because I think the Premier League's a write-off anyway. I'm kind of glad that he didn't risk some of the players and took some of the players off when needed to because for me, Premier League's done. I don't care about it. The only thing that we've got going for us this season is that Europa League, and I'd rather have our best players fit for those games to try and get through to the knockout rounds and keep progressing in this tournament because that is literally our only saving grace for this season, and I think it's only Ange's saving grace too.
Yeah, but Danny, I guess the point is that with the Europa League, 3.5 weeks away, with going into a 2-week international break now, was there a need for so much rotation?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with what Jim said. To be honest, with like when you get a hamstring injury or a muscular injury, how long could you be out for? I mean, at one point we were having a player injured every single game this season. So every single game is like, who's the next person to be injured? So it's like I prefer that he's doing what he's doing now. It's a shame that he wasn't doing this at the beginning of the season because that was more of my gripe with why was he kept using the same players over and over again when we had serious injury problems, and then he was running up players into the ground. And there was more that we could go into about like how they mismanaged the players and how they mismanaged their they're coming back to play into the team and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, no, I'm glad he did it because I think right now I don't think he's that stupid. I think he's I don't I mean we can I mean I've got my opinions on his management style and tactics and all this kind of stuff, but in terms of what he's doing with that decision, I think is the best thing he could have done. Because let's face it, our season has been so bad in the Premier League and so inconsistent. I mean, the amount of games we've lost is diabolical, really, for a Tottenham team, especially with the fact that last year he finished fifth with a worse team. This year he's got a better squad and he's finishing way, way, way down that table. Which is, again, you can blame injuries, but it's more than just injuries. And yeah, for me, I think he has to focus, and I think he is. I think you can see that he's trying to keep those players fresh and not injured because he knows that Europa League is the really only saving grace for his season.
Yeah. No, I agree to a certain extent, and I definitely agree with what Jim was saying. You know, I said yesterday that I didn't have a problem with any of the players coming in. Brennan Johnson, I could understand why he came in. I could understand why Taylor came in. I could understand why Davis came in. Udogie as well. I just couldn't understand why Maddison wasn't on that pitch, because we just need some guile. You need some creativity. You need someone to push you forward. So one of him or Bergvall had to be in that midfield on Sunday to give us any sort of hope to break down this Fulham side.
Do you know what, Ben? It's like we saw it against Alkmaar, right? It's like with this team and the way Ange wants to try and play, right? This so-called Ange ball. It's like you need to have the exact players with the exact attributes, with the exact quality for it to even work. And even when we have those players, it doesn't always work. It's like 1 in 50 attempts or 50 attacks that we get that kind of amazing football that we see, like we saw for the third goal against Alkmaar. But how often does that happen? And that's because we don't have 25 quality players who can rotate without dropping the level of ability that's on the field. And the problem we have is that, like we saw against Alkmaar, as soon as you take off Bergvall, Maddison, and Van der Ven, we collapsed. We capitulated, and we were lucky they didn't score more goals in the game at Alkmaar. It was like we were a different team completely. We had no. It was like the cohesion was gone. It was like the confidence had gone, and the drop was unbelievable. And as soon as you take Maddison out, we've got no creativity whatsoever. But this is a systemic problem. We've had this with Pochettino. As soon as we took Eriksen out of the team, when he was on form, or if Eriksen wasn't playing well, it was like we had no creativity, or it was like we had to rely on one of our top players to come up with a piece of magic. And that's what it was like. So people forget that as well.
I agree with you there. And I think it's easy to forget as well when you look back at 10 years under previous managers. Like, a lot of this stuff is attributed to being like a specific Ange problem, when it's a bit more of a wider thing than that. If you look back at when Poch was a manager, I think I did actually write it down before, but essentially in his first year in the League Cup, we reached the final, I think, against Chelsea. Yeah. But from then on, the League Cup all the cup performances were absolutely diabolical. We were doing really well in the league, but that was partly because we didn't have the squad depth to compete on multiple fronts. In a similar way, I don't think Ange going into a season with, in hindsight, when you look back and you go, you've got 2 super injury prone centre backs, right? And I'm going to send you into a season with Ben Davies, who were adapted to play a left centre back in his 30s, as one of your covers, and Dragusin, who we've identified was in hindsight the wrong profile of player for the system. But those are going to be your only 2 options. And by the way, you're not going to have a backup left back either. I think that was just a crazy situation to kind of go into the season in hindsight, and there should have been some prioritisation differently in the window to set him up better. Because Poch had similar, right? In his second season, he lost in the 5th round to Leicester at home in the Cup. He lost in the 5th round to Palace in the third season in the Cup. He lost to Chelsea then in the semi-final playing Sonny at left wing back. He lost in the Man United in the semis he dropped Lloris for Vorm, and then that went wrong. And it was the same in the League Cup as well as the FA Cup. We lost at Arsenal at home in the 3rd round. He rested Son, Walker, Lloris and Jan because he had to. But imagine if Ange went into a game against Arsenal in the Cup and rested his best centre-back, his goalkeeper, his central midfielder and his striker. We'd never hear the end of it. And I think it's been a repeated pattern from all our managers, and I don't think any of them are bad coaches. I just don't think we kind of set ourselves up to compete in multiple fronts, and that makes it really difficult for them to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at the history of, I think if you look at the history of the ENIC tenure, every single season probably you can point at something that we just haven't done right in terms of squad building and gathering a squad to give the manager the exact tools that he needs to go and deliver on all four or all three fronts. So yeah, that's definitely frustrating. But I want to bring Sim in here because he hasn't chimed in on his 2 cents yet.
I'm keeping quiet.
He's keeping lurking in the darkness here, my brother. But me and Sim had a big debate yesterday regarding the Maddison situation and about the changes. So obviously you have a differing view.
Not differing. I agree with what they're saying. I think I wanted Maddison in the team, and I think without him in the team, he definitely lacked creativity. My only point is, obviously he played on Thursday. We don't know. We know Maddison is a kind of player who physically needs to be managed. We've seen in previous seasons at Leicester, he's always picked up injuries. Last season, he picked up an injury. He's a player who, if he's played too much, he can kind of go missing in games, and all of a sudden he's not. He has to be at his sharpest, I guess, a lot of the time, especially in the kind of way we play. When he's not at his sharpest, he can be a bit of a liability in that middle. He can go missing. So my only point was, if he was tired from Thursday, then it was the right decision not to start him on Sunday. I don't know if he was tired or not. We haven't heard anything suggesting that he had a knock or any kind of injury, but we know he's definitely a player who does suffer from fatigue, and he is a player who does generally play his best when he's playing kind of one game a week rather than two. So I'm not saying that I wouldn't have liked to see him in the team and it was the right decision to leave him out. All I'm saying is, if he was tired from Thursday, then I can understand Ange leaving him out for Sunday. That was my only point. And we don't know that. That's the only, we don't know if he was tired from Thursday or not. We know he's a player who does get tired quite easily. I think that's fair to say. So I think that was my only point. I think he's in a bit of a difficult situation right at the moment, Ange, because in a perfect world, if the season had gone differently, right now you'd want to keep the core of the team together quite consistently to kind of build momentum for those Europa League games, and you want to keep that consistent team, so they build that cohesion, they have that winning feeling together. Momentum is such a powerful thing in football, I feel. And I feel like right now he would kind of want Romero van der Ven playing most games, a bit like how Gabriel and Saliba play most games for Arsenal. He would want them in the core of the team. He would want people like Maddison in the core of the team. He'd want Son. He'd want Bergvall playing most games. Like, he want a core there, and then you can maybe change around it. But at the moment, the way the season's gone with all the injuries we've had, and he's still managing minutes at the moment, and players are still getting to kind of 100% physically. A lot of them are still not up to speed. They're still getting there, managing themselves. So he's in a situation where he's kind of not just picking a team to win the game. Essentially, he's kind of picking a team to manage minutes as well, so that other players are staying fit. So when they come back after international break, all these players are ready to step in for each game at 100%, rather than like how you want a manager to be able to manage his team, where he has a choice of all these players are 100% fit, and he can just pick and choose how tactically he wants to go to try and win this game, what the best fit is for this specific game tactically, right? So he can pick certain players. So he thinks this game is going to require this sort of player, that game is going to require that sort of player, and he can just pick and choose what kind of players he wants. He's just not there at the moment, squad-wise, I feel. He is there in terms of availability, in terms of like they're becoming available now. A lot of players are back from injury, so are available to be selected. But in terms of, at the moment, he's just kind of managing who's 100% fit, who's at their sharpest, who's basically not as tired as a lot of the other players, who's needs more minutes in their legs because they've been out of the team, who's been playing too much. That's kind of what he's been juggling at the moment, and that's what's led to those 7 changes. Obviously, he made on Sunday. I think in a perfect world, he wouldn't have made 7 changes. Maybe he'd made 2 or 3, but that's just not where we're at the moment, unfortunately. I think he wishes and we wish he wasn't there. But when you've been through what we've been through, 3 months with 12 injuries, people being overplayed for so long, I think he just has to deal with the hand he's dealt, and that's what he feels is best, how to deal with it. And it's frustrating to watch. And I think yesterday, in a way, we keep it a 0-0. up until the subs come on, and then we bring our big hitters and try and win the game. It's not a bad way to approach it, and it could have worked, but he obviously had to rotate Romero, and that obviously went against us as well. That kind of, because as soon as Romero went off, you just saw Gray and even Davis, it coincided Muniz coming on as well, and then he just started bullying our centre backs, and all of a sudden they're getting all sorts of joy, where they were really getting no joy at all in that second half up until Romero went off. And I thought it was working, the plan. I've made him, Solanke puts that chance away, we go 1-0 up, and all of a sudden the plans come to fruition, but didn't happen that way, unfortunately. But unfortunately, people don't give. I'm not saying we were necessarily unlucky on Sunday, but I would say it wasn't the worst performance that I've seen in terms of how the game went. But we're not. I think a lot of fans are not prepared to give him any grace for any more losses because of the amount of losses we have had this season. And so, however we lose games now, it doesn't matter if it's lucky or not lucky or however it is, he's going to have that stick to beat him with because we have just lost so many games. So it doesn't really matter at this point in the context of those losses because everyone's put in context for those other losses. So now that players have come back, everyone is sick of any sort of reason or excuse for why we've lost a game. And that's how I see it.
Yeah,
I think it's spot on.
The thing is, right, that you say it like we're talking about the players coming back and people getting annoyed that we've lost the game because the players are back and Ange is not using those players, but we have to look at like the actual facts that we have, right? And the facts are like we've got some terrible facts. I don't know if you know this, right? But in the last 18 months, do you know that Dragushin and Ben Davies have had more clean sheets than Van de Ven and Romero?
What,
you
playing
are
together?
Playing together at centre back.
Is that right?
Now,
is that true?
Have a look. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, but they probably played a lot more.
Not in the last 18 months. Van de Ven and Romero have played more games together than them two have. That's what's crazy. The fact that them two have had more clean sheets is absolutely insane. I saw this the other day. I was like, no, that can't be right.
We
but no.
That.
I mean, you say that, Danny, but like at the beginning of the season, like for the first 12 games, I think we conceded 12 goals. Like our defensive record wasn't bad.
No. That's
yeah,
true.
It's not Sim. How many goals have we conceded all season? Like the only team that's conceded more than us is Southampton. Leicester.
Yeah, because we haven't had Romero Van de Ven. That's why.
That's nothing to do with it.
I mean, but the stats say it is. The facts say you were talking about facts. The facts say that is the case.
Yeah, but if you go back to last season, what happened in the last 15 games of last season?
Sorry, I've lost you.
He said what happened in the last 15 games of last season.
Go on, say that again.
What was our performances like of the last 15 games of last season?
Again.
Oh.
He says what happened in the last 15 games of last season.
What happened in the last 15 games? Well, the last 7, I think it's fair to say, for sure. We crumbled. We played the top 5 teams, a lot of them away from home, and we completely capitulated. There's no doubt about it. We conceded a lot of goals.
Do you know, Sim, that we haven't won 3 back-to-back games in the Premier League since October 2023?
Say that again?
Did you know we haven't won 3 back-to-back games in the Premier League since October 2023?
We just did.
3 Premier League games.
Yeah, we won 3 in a row. We just won 3 in a row.
That was the first time since then, yeah.
That was the first time since then.
Right, okay, fine, yeah.
But to be fair, Danny, on some of that context, I think we got at the 20-game season point, only 5 teams had won 2 on the bounce all season. I think it was some crazy numbers like that, because there's a lot of change that's gone on in the sense that now you have going to the season, we had Bournemouth and Ipswich outspent Inter Milan, Juventus, AC Milan, Roma, Porto, Ajax. Like these clubs with 10, 12,000 seater stadiums are picking up 40, 50 million pound players now. And I think what we've seen is the bottom 3 of the league have gotten worse. The teams coming up are getting weaker and weaker, but the middle teams that are staying in the league are absorbing this commercial revenue and building to a point now where only Liverpool and Arsenal have really been able to build any meaningful consistency this season. But I'm not justifying our form right. We're 14th. There's no way I can sit here and be like, actually, we're playing really well. We're just 14th for some bad luck. I'm not saying that in any way. But I am just saying it is a weird time in the league, and things have changed quite a lot. And if you look at how we did in the Cups, we're doing terrible in the league. We'll move to but if you look at the League Cup, we got to the semi-finals and lost against Liverpool. I think that was, and we had a horrible run through that cup. We did really well to get to the semis. I actually thought we had we were quite respectfully good in the League Cup. And FA Cup, we lost to Villa away, didn't we, when we were in that real kind of injury-prone stage away from home. I don't think that was anything too awful. And the Europa League, we're doing better than we do most years in Europe. We're getting further than we do normally. I've seen us crash out in the Conference League to a team whose manager was in jail.
The thing is, though, it's not just about that, because we get to the crucial moments and we've absolutely been obliterated by a Liverpool team who just got beat by Newcastle in the League Cup. Now, if that was us in the League Cup final against Newcastle, with the way that they performed on that day, we would have got obliterated by Newcastle completely because of the way we play. And for me, if you actually look at the stats, right, we're actually getting progressively worse in terms of, only recently things have started to get a tiny bit better in terms of how we're performing.
I wonder why that is, Danny.
Yeah, but it's nothing. No, but Sim, it's still inconsistent. We still did not win the game against Fulham. Fulham looked like the better team. I understand that. But this has been a problem since we lost when we lost the game at Chelsea at the Lane when we had Van der Ven go off injured, and we had I think, did we get a red card as well? When
the game went down to everyone talked about that game. Yeah,
but since that game, Sim, we haven't had a consistent run of form at all. Not one bit. And that's been how long now?
Right? That's not necessarily true.
We can't, no, that's a fact. We can't say that it's just because we have injuries, or just because we had injuries that was the massive problem. It's an excuse, right? The teams that Ange Postecoglou's put out should be good enough to sustain a top 6 finish. I'm sorry, but it has to be, right? They are good enough. They're just not being coached properly. I've never seen Tottenham be so open at the back. It's ridiculous. And the worst thing about it is that they always, do you know what? I was actually going through some interviews from players, right, who have the teams that have beaten us this season. And do you know what the funny thing is? So many of these players, I watched 4 interviews, and every single one of the players that were interviewed after a game who beat Tottenham, right? They will say, "Yeah, we knew how to play against Tottenham." It's like everyone knows how to play against Tottenham, because every single time they go down the flanks, especially the right hand side, because we're so exposed. Because half the time our fullbacks are like in near the penalty box, right, of the opposition, and it's like, where are you? And they're not tracking back, and the players shouldn't be expected to track back constantly like that. The amount of running that Porro's done this season is insane, but it's not fully his fault why he's so exposed, because we're not having the defenders. You've got 2 defenders basically trying to stop a whole break, and they're trying to run back all the time. It's for me, right, it's night and day compared to Pochettino's tactics, when we had, for example, better quality players, but if you look at the way he played, right, we had one of the most solid defense in Europe for like nearly 3 years, and we had one of the best attacks in Europe for that period, right? But we were so solid at the back. We weren't open like a brothel basically. It's like, it's crazy. Like, it really is. Like, genuinely, it's mind blowing.
But do you think, Danny, there is like, the reason I don't like comparing, and I think at the moment, especially because of Poch's comments this morning, everyone's naturally, it's natural to start looking at what we had versus what we have now. And when we start comparing those 2 eras, I think it's really hard to compare an era with prime Kane and Son playing together, who were probably the best attacking duo in world football, that he had consistently together for 5 years. And I'd argue Toby and Jan were probably our best and most injury-free centre-back pairing, who I would love to have. I would actually swap Van der Ven and Toby right now for what we have, purely because even though I think on their day Romero and Van der Ven are more talented players, they can't do the most important thing which you need of your defenders, and that is to be consistently available and consistently be there to lead on the pitch and provide that continuity at the back. So I think it's hard to compare those periods of time personally between them. I do see what you're saying of the system being like having flaws and weaknesses to it, and it being exposed.
It's exactly that. It's the defense is too exposed all the time. It's like do you know why it's funny that we have these teams like Ipswich beating us at home? We have Leicester. I mean, these teams are terrible. Like Ipswich, one of the worst teams in the league, in the Premier League, in terms of what they've achieved this season, right? And the fact that we got beat at home to this team, right, is unbelievable. And for me, it's like it's like they know the game plan, and it's like what frustrates me with the way that we get set up is that Ange doesn't. He's so stubborn in his tactics that he just doesn't want to. It's like his way or the highway. That's it. It's like it's kind of just like that.
Do you think that we have changed a bit? Because I do look at, if I went back 6 months and watched Tottenham trying to defend a corner versus now, I don't sit now and be like, oh no, another set piece, we're in trouble. I now think we've adapted to those situations. Something's gone right on the training pitch because we no longer look vulnerable there. I do think that the main issue of me with it is, and I'm still in the kind of camp of, I want to see this play out with one more transfer window behind him before I make my final decision. And I'm still in the camp of keeping him. But I do have a big issue where when we lose the ball in the final third, if I could have, did you guys watch, was it Bernard's watch or something when you were kids? This kid is like a stopwatch, you can stop time. Yeah. If I had one of those, I'd be a millionaire, because every time we lose the ball in the final third and we're running at there, if I could pause time and put a bet on us conceding within the next 10 seconds, I would be right so much more often than not. That is the area that I'm struggling with. And that is as someone who backs Ange and believes in him and thinks he can turn it around with the right players. But that area, and I think you're flagging it there, where we're horribly exposed on the counter-attack time and time again.
How many times have you seen us this season, we miss a chance, and then as soon as we miss that chance, they go and concede straight away. And we get punished so often.
It happened at Bournemouth.
Yeah, it happened on the way. It happened against Bournemouth, happened against Villa.
I think it's happened in the last 3 or 4 games, literally.
Against RZ, how many times are we looking like we're in control? We have a chance, we miss that chance, and then bam, we get hit immediately. It's not. I don't think it's switching off. I think it's a high risk, high reward. So we pour so many players forward, don't we, to try and score that goal? And the risk, the reward is obviously because we have so many players forward. Surely, if you put that ball across the face of goal, one of them's going to tap it in. But the risk is if it doesn't go in, bam, we are exposed if they're able to hit a quick counter, which is why we supposed to press, but press at those moments.
Do you know why that is? Because like going back to kind of what Jim was mentioning earlier, again, it's like I'd say there's about 70% of the players are playing for the manager, and the rest of them are not, right? They're just not. So when you've got a team that is not fully on board with what you're trying to achieve, right? You're gonna have inconsistencies, like we've seen. You're gonna have issues with these kind of patterns of play that we're seeing, right? You're gonna have a lot of mistakes because there'll be times where, you saw it the other day, even like against Fulham, he just wasn't even tracking back. He was like jogging. And how many times have you seen, what frustrates me the most this season is what I've seen is the amount of times the players are just standing around, not moving. I've watched Villa quite a lot this season, right? And I've watched them, and I love the way they sometimes play football because the players are constantly moving around. You could even say the same for Newcastle. They're always looking to move around. The only player in our team that actually does that is Bergvall at the moment. He's the only player. He's always on the look. He's always scanning. He's always trying to find space. He's always trying to make something to progress the ball forward. But everyone else, when they're getting the ball, they just stand there like expecting someone to do something, and no one's doing it because there's no cohesion there. It's like we're putting a bunch of players together that have never played with each other before. That's what it feels like a lot of the time, and that is a manager problem. That is that you can blame, and that's maybe even you could really touch into the cultural problem of this club. But that is got to come from the manager for me, because if he can't get all those players on board, then there's a problem. And whether that's the players or not, then you get rid of those players.